There are two possibilities that have to be on the table. The first is that period pain can be bad enough that you need time off work. The second is period pain can't be bad enough that you need time off work. What cannot be the case is that period pain in Spain is bad enough that you need time off work, but the period pain in the United Kingdom is not. So either this policy is wrong and the Spanish have got it wrong, or we've got it wrong in not adopting it, right? And what it would do to an environment in which we're trying to encourage employers to take on a more diverse workforce, which has got to mean more women in employment. And it seems to me that this is probably going to be a regressive policy. After all, we tell people that their biology is not something by which they are judged, and we tell people that their biology is not something that's going to hold them back in the workplace. Well, suddenly you tell employers that maybe someone in your workforce is going to be out for 3 days a month. It's going to make it difficult, isn't it?
Isn't it going to make it difficult? That's Alex Dean, and he was on Great Britain News Network, and he was talking about this plan from Spain to allow up to 3 days a month for women to have menstrual leave based off of the pain that they experience with that time of the month. Okay, so apparently, if it's opened up to these types of things, we're supposed to allow this equality within the workplace. Maybe this is going to make people some people gun shy. That's a general argument that I'm sure we would be ready to hear. Let's hear first see some details from this legislation here. So other countries in the world already grant menstrual leave. These include Japan, South Korea, Indonesia, and Zambia. Under the reform package set to pass in Spain's next cabinet meeting on Tuesday, schools will also be required to provide sanitary pads for girls who need them. Oh man, this is really getting radical. So, although this panel had 4 people, you guys saw Alex Dean there was 2 women of the 4 on this panel. One of them, Mo Lavet, she had a different reason for calling this regressive, which Alex also called it there. Let's watch what she had to say.
You've got severe period pains, as many of us do. You aren't going to worry about whether or not you have to take time off. You're going to have to take time off if it's that bad. But why do you have to tell your boss what your pain's to do with? I mean, I was thinking about how this is quite a regressive policy. The first ever job interview I had upon leaving school in 1987, they asked me if I had a boyfriend, if I was planning on getting married, and if I was planning to have kids within the next sort of 2 years or whatever. We fought massively to have equal representation in the workplace. And there were a lot of old-fashioned people at the time who said women couldn't do the job properly. They weren't as robust as men. They would take more time off for kind of.
It reinforces some very old stereotypes.
It's actually quite regressive.
It reinforces some very old stereotypes.
But if it's bad, you ring your boss. You tell him you're not well. You don't have to tell him specifically. I hate the fact that we have to talk about our bodies all the time.
We're going to get to a lot of the other thoughts, but first I want to get this point by point because Jessica, on that one from Mo Lavet, she was saying, we had to do all these things throughout my time in the 80s, first starting the workforce, and they said that we're weaker, but I hate that this is now highlighting that or making it seem like we're weaker. Is that what you got? And by the way, it's, I'd love whatever perspective it is that comes. I don't think there's much of right or wrong when it comes to folks who actually experience it. Is that something you think may be felt in the workplace if this happens?
Definitely not. I think when women started joining the workforce, the formal labor market where you're paid for your work with wages and salaries, when women started entering the workforce, it was set up only for men who their bodies run on a daily cycle. Women's bodies run on a monthly cycle. And so if women are to be integrated into the workforce and it's set up for men, changes need to happen for that to appropriately happen. And so if you're not going to be discriminated against for your biology, we've got to adjust the workforce so that it's something women can participate in fully, because I guarantee many women who experience severe period pain are not doing their best work during those 3 or so days of the month. And so to say that this is like old fashioned or regressive is ridiculous. It's kind of treating menstruation like it's taboo and shouldn't be talked about, which is what is old fashioned and regressive.
We're still hanging on to those feelings and applying it in this situation. It has to be normalized. And I think we sometimes forget that. There's a lot of smart people in the world and we talk about how things can be implemented, but we forget of how things have been perceived or been presented to us, and our perception is just negative in the first place. So as soon as it's even brought up, it's, oh my God, that again, them, really. It happens with a lot of people who get overlooked in the world. I was gonna say this country, but in the world. So there's more, because also Michelle Dewberry, who's also a businesswoman, a TV host, politician as well over there in Britain, she also had this to say about how this could be abused. I wasn't surprised to hear this, but I was surprised to hear it from her.
I know that as a woman, I should be championing the old sisterhood and banging the table, going, never mind 3 days, give us 5. But I have to say a but here, because I worry about stuff like this becoming almost like a chances charter, that you'll sit there and go, oh yeah, look at that sunshine, that's a nice bright day. Oh, I can't come in, Mr. or Mrs. Boss, I've got period pain. And who's even going to challenge that? Which boss is going to go, really, have you?
Look, if you've
Really, because also that point was also asked to the last panelist here. He's a lobbying and media relations executive, Kevin Craig, and he was asked about that. What if someone just wants to go take a beach day and they actually don't have these issues? He was asked, let's watch.
It's too late for that, right? The chances chart is there already. If people want to lie to their bosses, make up illness, and pretend they're sick till they have to get certified, you can already do that, right? And ultimately, that I think is a trigger and a signal that someone's not happy in the workplace. But I bounced this proposal because a bit like Alex, I see this as an issue that women should lead the debate on. And I asked a number of young colleagues at work. We're a 60% female workforce out of soon to be 100 people, and they were really happy with it, and they thought it was supportive and modern.
Ask the people who are affected by it, and we'll see. Now, there was 2 women on the panel, and they had different varying views, but as far as getting just a sick day or 3 sick days because you're faking it, how often would you utilize something like that, you slackers? Jessica, what are your thoughts on this point?
Yeah, I think he had the greatest perspective out of all of them. There's a lot of people right now that are upset about people making legislation about uteruses, but this one's good in my book. And I've been following what the unions in Spain are saying about this. And it's interesting that they're so mixed. Some of them are fully supporting it. It makes work more accessible for women, that's great. Others are saying that they're worried about hiring, that in the hiring process, women might be asked, do you have painful periods? Women are already asked inappropriately, do you plan on having children? And they might not get hired, they might choose to hire men instead. And what I have to say to those unions is like, yeah, that's where you come in. You're supposed to build the worker power that holds corporations and businesses accountable to not have these hiring practices. And so to make sure that this legislation is effective, you need strong unions. People in the labor market need to have unions in Spain because they're already considering legislation as a part of this bill that would require people to prove, with a doctor's note that they actually do have a certain condition. And of course, there are some people who experience period pain who don't actually have a medical condition. And so it's gonna get really in the weeds unless we have a strong workforce and a strong labor movement that is fighting for these rights. And they do have a left government that is fighting pretty strongly for this. And interestingly, a part of this bill is actually Spain making abortion more accessible and a part of their universal healthcare program. So this is really progressive policy for women in Spain, but I think they're gonna have to fight for it so that it gets implemented appropriately.
Could you see this happening here, number one? And number two, it's almost a domino effect. Once certain women's rights or certain things are specifically recognized for women's rights and workforce specifically, it could lead to one thing, then the next thing, now abortion rights, then access to sanitary pads, things like that in the schools. All these things they don't want going this direction. So I'm gonna let you answer those really quick.
Yeah, I think in the United States, we have men who are incels in the US who will fight this tooth and nail, like why are they getting free stuff, all of that. But of course, I think if it was men who were menstruating, you already wouldn't have taxes on menstrual products. They would probably already have time off or an adjusted work schedule for this. And so if it does happen in the United States, I think it would have to happen also with really strong unions and a big push from the workforce, because I don't see it coming out of this Congress for sure.
It would be normal, and then normal things happen off of normalcy. If it's abnormal, then we're like, how do we do this?